Welcome to another episode of Prepper Talk Radio, radio for the ready-minded, the podcast for the prepared. You've got your hosts in the house, Scott, Shane, and Paris. We're excited to be here on this whatever time you're listening. We're excited to have you listen with us. We're going to share a couple fun things in this episode. We got a lot packed into it. We've got some great things to share. We're going to learn the old ways and kind of focus in on some of the things that have been lost potentially. And so hopefully you'll spend a few minutes and go to our website, preppertalkradio.com, and check out our resources there and get involved in our mailing, our email list so that you can stay in touch with us. Check out our Facebook group at Emergency Prep and Self-Reliance. And stay tuned for all the fun and exciting things that we're going to be doing and putting out in the Prepper Talk world. So we also want to remind you about shortages. Right now, there's tariffs and shortages, and we're going to talk about some of that stuff in some upcoming episodes. But I want to make sure you guys check out our friends at Jase Medical, Jase Medical. You can actually just type in Jase, JASE.com. If you use code Prepper Talk, you'll get $10 off, and that is your opportunity to stock up on all your medicines. And we highly recommend that you have medicines for emergencies, but then take time to really get good at learning how to be healthy and just, do some homeopathic alternatives. But in the meantime, until those things can build up and your immune system can get back to where it needs to be, Jase Medical has your antibiotics and has your daily meds. Go over there and check that out. Use, again, Prepper Talk to get $10 off your order. So, guys, here we are, another day, another dollar, as they say. Excited to talk about the old ways. Shane, you love the old ways, brother.
I do love the old ways. You've heard me say it a million times. I realize I haven't said this for a while, right? I can't think of the last time I said, look to the past to prepare for the future, right? I mean, that's been one of my mottos for the longest time. I think
that's a staple out of your mouth on the show.
Yeah.
As I've prepared for this episode, that's all I've thought about.
Right?
I could hear Shane in the back of my head over and over.
It's been a while since it's actually come out of my lips there, because I had a slightly new version where when I kind of reinvented myself a little bit, right? Look to the past and you'll see the future. Then, that kind of has to do with me changing from a prepper to a preparer, right? Prepper is kind of getting washed out. That term is, I think, a little washed out. It changes to homesteader and other versions, survivalist. There's go back and forth and such, but so I consider myself more of a preparer, than a prepper, for various reasons, which we don't need to get into. But, as I see things, technology advancing at an incredibly rapid pace, I want to leave it behind. I want to move backwards, especially AI. I mean, that's going to be in everything. It's going to be everywhere. I've been trying to avoid it. I don't know that I will be able to moving forward, because everything will have AI integrated into it somehow.
Yep.
Right. So the problem with AI is we are just like with GPS, example for GPS, right? We don't even know how to navigate without that anymore, right? Using maps. Before GPS, we just kind of figured out where to go. We'd have a map, depending on where you live. Here in Utah, it's pretty easy to get around without a map. But now, we're glued to our GPS. I think it's going to be the same thing, and I think it already kind of is. Oh, let's Google it. Let's find out what Let's ask Alexa. What's the answer? I think with AI, it's going to be even worse that way. So I think that's one of the reasons that I keep thinking back to the old ways, air quote,
Well, one thing, speaking of AI, you can't even surf the web without saying, hey, would you like to have so-and-so Grok or 3 or whatever, Grok 17, whatever it is now, come out and say, would you like to have us help you tell you what to do? Anyways, a friend of mine, who's a financial coach like me, he's actually been doing it for a lot longer and he's really good at it. Anyways, he said, people today can go on the internet and they can look up how to do anything. Like you can how to type it into JetSheet, whatever AI you're doing, and it'll give you a list of things. But the experience that comes from actually doing it, is what he calls authentic intelligence. And he kind of, is using the AI to AI, AI artificial intelligence to AI authentic intelligence. And to me, that's the AI that I want to have. I want to have that authentic intelligence where it's been based on skill, experience, time, and just really do in the trenches doing that. The intelligence, the wisdom, and that's really more wisdom, honestly, than it is intelligence.
Wisdom is the key.
That's a big part of the old ways. I think the old ways, people were more resilient, and they had. One of the things that I'm going to bring to the table's discussions today is a little bit about Stoicism and how that whole philosophy was designed to help people through the problems of life, and how seeking answers to the problems that come up through philosophy, through wise wisdom, just, not philosophizing all the time, but actually implementing, doing, and acting, not just preaching and teaching, but actually implementing and doing. And resilience is a huge thing that we've lost. I mean, shoot, our Gen Z, whatever it is, it seems like you blow on them and they're crumbling like snowflakes.
Mm-hmm. What's funny is, like, you brought up wisdom, and wisdom is the combination of knowledge and experience, right? You were calling authentic intelligence. It's the knowledge and experience. And we don't have a whole lot of wisdom in the newer generations because they have zero experience. Experience is expensive, right? Because it takes time. That, more than anything, it takes your time. Mm-hmm. You have to actually put effort into it. And AI bypass it. I work in digital marketing, and a lot of the stuff that I do there, I see so many people like, oh yeah, you don't need to learn that skill. Just do AI. And I'm like,
yeah,
but then you didn't learn anything. Then you don't have the wisdom to know, should I or should I not do that, right? You lose ethics. And that's one of the things I love about thinking back to the old ways. It's like the wisdom, the ethics, the morality that were part of life 100 years ago is what we've lost more than anything. Wisdom and morality. We are decaying as a society, intellectually, spiritually, emotionally. Now everybody needs a safe space and comfort food and something to stream on. Like that's kind of all everybody's talking about, all everybody's looking forward to. And I just think back, like, okay, when I was probably 6 years old, I was camping with my grandpa, my whole family, but my grandpa. And I remember him saying, oh, you guys be back by noon, be back by lunchtime because it's going to rain this afternoon. And I'm looking around, I'm like, how's he know it's going to rain? And we'd been there a few days. And I'm like, Grandpa, it's not going to rain. It's sunshine all day. I was wrong. It rained at like 2:00. And I've asked him, he's since passed on, but I've asked him, like, how do you know when it's going to rain if there's nothing in the sky? And he goes, I grew up on a farm, and you had to know your seasons and you had to know your weather cycles. And I can feel the humidity in the air before the storm cloud gets here. I watch where the birds are going. I watch everything. And by knowing all those things, he's acquired wisdom. And he knows, hey, it's going to rain, so get in. And we're camping, so we're around all these big, tall trees, and you want to be somewhere safe when the lightning hits or when the floods come, right? And that's what we're missing. And I think that's why this topic is so exciting for me, because let's dive into the skills and things that they used to use every day, the knowledge, so that we can start acquiring wisdom again, because it's not going to be too much longer before we have to live the same way they did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's where I come from. But I think like just to kind of button it up, if we rely on AI to do everything, I mean, that seems to me to be kind of the globalist plan, that our government is going to be AI run. I mean, that's, in my opinion, that's kind of what's happening with Doge, right? Is shutting things down. Eventually, it's going to be AI running things. But like you said, Scott, the important part about it is time. That's one of the things I have on my list. Slow down. Mm-hmm. That's really what it seems to me. I mean, obviously, our ancestors, they were busy. They were hard workers. but they did one thing at a time. There was, and of course, I'm probably out speaking myself, but I don't see that there was much multitasking, right? It was focus on something important, take your time, do it well.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a summary of kind of everything that is on my list.
Well, it's not just being able to do something or to just get it done, but do something to do it well.
Mm-hmm.
There was pride in workmanship. There was ownership. Like, I think that was one of the things that I love about the older generations. There's major ownership that's lacked in our human nature today. They were responsible for taking care of things. Now, I'm speaking broadly. Some people are going to listen to this and go, oh, my grandpa was an a-hole, or my grandma was psychotic, or right? In microcosm, yeah, there's some tough stuff, right? One of my grandpas, one of the worst people in the history of America, like just garbage. The other one, a saint, right? Polar opposites. And the honesty, integrity, and work ethic of the one that's the saint, there's more like him than there are of the other grandpa, right? And even more, it's like we need to just look at, okay, what were the good things and adopt and practice all those as much as possible in our lives today, and be very intentional and thoughtful in how we do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one thing to me that kind of sums up what you're just saying there is something that we do maybe 2-3 times a week, trying to do better, is eating together as a family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like that was, of course, looking back to older films, movies, and so forth, and just knowing family tradition of our family and ancestors is, sitting down to dinner, maybe not lunch, maybe not breakfast, maybe breakfast more than lunch, but yeah, sitting down to eat regularly and not having the distractions of a device, right?
Yeah.
Very different time, obviously. But that's top on my list.
That's legit. There's a lot of, I think what you said earlier, Scott, about intention, I think you said it too, Shane. Intention is something that it's kind of a buzzword a little bit right now. And it's funny because it just seems so obvious to those who've kind of had this older, wiser, old ways mentality. It's like, we don't do things frivolously. We don't spend money frivolously. We don't spend time frivolously. We recognize that you don't have, like a lot of the time, farmers, for example, they didn't have time to waste. They had to be it was harvest. It was, especially in Idaho, potato farmers. I've seen some of the videos about some of the things they have to go through. And it's like, if you sometimes you're up at 2 or 3 in the morning, like you can't miss, like the window is very short and you can't miss it. Otherwise the whole crop can be destroyed. And that work ethic is something that's really been lost a little bit, I think. And the intentionality is such a buzzword now, because it's funny how we come full circle around in history, so, it really goes back to that old saying about good men create good times and hard men create hard times, whatever that saying is. I'm sorry, I'm totally butchering it. Scott, you know it better than I do.
Hard men make good times. Good times make weak men. Weak men make hard times. And then it cycles.
In that cycle. And so it's the same thing with, for example, you'll see fashion. There's a lot of fashions that are coming back now that I was like, man, that was my fashion when I was a kid or whatever. And then but wisdom is, I feel like this whole idea of purpose and intention and really understanding why or what's going on around us it's kind of coming back. And the people who are promoting are like, oh, wow, that's so cool. This new idea. Like, no, dude, it's been around for, like you said, you just do a little bit of history research and you'll see that was the common everyday man back 50 years ago or whatever, it's funny.
Yeah.
This happened last 2017 or 2018. You guys probably saw this. There's a research group of college students. They're like, if we could harness the wind, we could get all these cargo ships to the U.S. without using fuel. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah, it's called sails.
It's called sails. And they were like, if we could put like sails on these, like we could put these things. And everyone's like, do you realize that it took
to generate electricity and then
Yeah, it took so long to get those across the ocean on wind, because you had to wait if the wind was good or not. And sometimes they'd just be out there floating, waiting.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's certain things like common sense that only comes through hard work and experience. Like as we have less physical experience and one-on-one experiences, even group experiences in life, we have less common sense, the less of those experiences we have. And so we're robbing future generations by not having them work hard. We're robbing them of critical thinking. We're robbing them of common sense.
Yeah, a few things I was thinking about that is Paris, you said money. Scott, you said work. Obviously, the nature of work has changed tremendously. It seems like most jobs, especially in the U.S., being a service economy, most jobs are digital. I spend a lot of time in the field, so I do have crews that work, but I do spend a lot of time in my office at my desk doing digital work as part of my work. And so living in the physical world is really what our ancestors did before us. There was no such thing as a digital world. There was no virtual reality. It was actual reality. So I think that is a big thing that we can change now, is live more in the physical world than in the digital world. And then my thoughts about, of course, on money is that money has changed, or currency, however you want to say it, has changed tremendously as well. There were stock markets, yeah, absolutely, but they did not have the financial instruments that are in the markets today, like options options were around some of these more complex instruments and so forth, which essentially make the markets gambling, right? And so that was very different. And
mutual funds and stuff have only been around for less than 100 years.
okay,
So
yeah,
I mean, how far back do you want to go? We don't even have to go back that far, really.
That's true. Yeah. And even thinking, back 50 plus years before I was born, I guess that's kind of where my thoughts go. Before I was born is kind of where my thoughts began and move backwards. Right. So, and obviously, the stock market has been around for a long time. And really a lot of these things started in 1913 when currency was able to be manipulated more easily. Right. And so on and so forth. And not to get into that, but I guess my point is right now why you can use cash as much as possible. Try to find community or people who will barter with what you have, or with gold or silver or whatever, and figure out, learn how that goes, because was a big part of life before I was born and hundreds of years before that, and not always just about money per se, currency.
It's funny. My brother messaged me today. He's like, I'm having a hard time deciding if I should buy more stocks or more gold and silver. I'm like, bro, gold and silver.
You know what I'm going to say.
It was kind of funny that he messaged me that thing today.
Bro, beans and rice.
Well, number one, yes, first one,
right?
And then freedom.
That's something that people back in the old days, so to speak, they recognize that. Look, not everything is going to always be peachy keen. Like, we're not always going to have although, wait a minute, let me back up, because in the 50s and 60s, you could get a job and you could stay there for 30 or 40 years and retire. Yeah. And you'd have a pension. That the company would pay for. Then all of a sudden, somebody got the bright idea to create a 401k and ended up ruining most of the retirement programs. That's anyways. There's pros and cons. Don't get me wrong. So there's pros and cons, but the general overall situation is Americans have gotten worse. We're now. The other thing too is that I see these reels all the time about the beach in the 70s, and everybody was fit. Everybody, well, at least they weren't bulging out of their swimming suits. They were in relatively good shape, and the 70s was only 50 years ago. I mean,
but it's the same if you go to Europe. Anywhere you go that doesn't serve the American food
diet,
the standard American diet, truly is horrible, because the preservatives, the chemicals that they allow in our foods, the same manufacturers are selling different food of the same name overseas, right?
And they take out half the ingredients.
If we can go back to growing our own food and utilizing natural, non-chemical preservative methods, right? That alone will help us lose weight and be more healthy.
So
But
I'll take it a
the
step
problem is
back from that even, Scott. Like if you, let's say you live in an apartment and you don't grow your own food, that's fine. Go buy at a
right, go to
farmer's
farmers
market.
markets.
Go
That was
buy
that was
food
where, yeah.
that's homegrown so that you're not eating this fast food processed crap. I'm reading a book right now on health, and one of the guy who wrote the book, if I said his name, you would know, and we don't. Anyways, he says, I think we should go back to God food. And I'm like, God food? That's kind of a cool way of saying it, because most people say whole foods or one ingredient foods, but he's like, no, if God created it and you can eat it, right? Pretty much the way God created it, that's God food. And that's how we need to be. We need to be eating more. That's basically a whole food diet, something that's more natural foods, not preserved. If man has gotten involved in it, it's probably going to have stuff in there that's going to cause you to have disease or some kind of problem, a health problem down the road if you're not careful.
Well,
not to say you can't have a cheat day or cheat meal or whatever, so to speak, every once in a while, but I like that. I like that idea of God food. I was like, that is cool.
Well, I guess to touch on that really quickly is, we see a lot of foods being pushed nowadays, like kale. Oh, it's really healthy for you. Actually, it's not. Our broccolis, our cauliflower, those types of foods have been modified and changed over the years that I've never known anything different, right? So yeah, if we go back to God food, what exactly is that? How do we actually exactly define, because our wheat has been, genetically modified and hybridized and so forth over the years.
That's true.
So they create more yield. And so how do we actually get back to God food and live as long as Adam did? Because Adam, had a much higher oxygen content and then actually had real food.
I was going to say that too. Like, he had a completely different atmosphere than what we're
Yeah, he had a few other benefits.
Right? He didn't have PFAS chemicals and everything else to deal with. But
petroleum-based everything.
Yeah, if we go back to more holistic approach to living, right? What's funny is pre-World War II, a lot of people were living out in the country. Their major city centers weren't near the way they are now. They really didn't have huge suburban areas, right? The whole move to that was after World War II. They're like, hey, after World War I, they did the Industrial Revolution, right? And they started pulling everybody back into the cities, and then you'd have to work 12 to 14-hour days minimum, 6 days a week, and often places it was 7 days a week until they started doing labor laws. But the only place to work were these industrial areas, and then you were forced to live in the city. So then you were no longer able to grow your own food because you didn't have time to do that, nor did you have space to do that, right? That's where the 15-minute cities are going to be moving people to, is that same thing, where you're wholly dependent on another system. They started creating canned foods, especially like canned meats and things like that. As soon as the wars were over, they're like, who's going to buy this? And so they lobbied to get people into the factories and into the cities so that they could have customers to sell their foods to. It was those same companies who still provide food for the military now. The military industrial complex controls and maintains and manipulates so much of our day-to-day living that we don't realize, because we've been generationally living this way for a long, long time. But I think if we can go back to skills like learning how to forage, right? In the wild, you're going to find the way the foods really were. Learning how to trap, to hunt, to fish, right? Then you're getting the healthiest food you're going to find, because there's no weird chemicals, hopefully, no vaccines in your animals, nothing you have to really worry about other than identification of, is that animal sick or not before I shoot it, right? Or before I trap it, or before I dispatch it. But then also looking at the skills of animal husbandry. We had a few weeks ago, we had a discussion on raising rabbits. That's one of the easiest things you can do for your meat source. Doesn't take a whole lot of space, doesn't take a whole lot of time. In a lot of cities, you can do it in your backyard.
Wow.
Quail.
Yeah.
Quail's even, more, another one. Small, tiny eggs.
Have you guys heard of the Campbell's Soup Index?
No.
Campbell's Soup was about 10 cents in the year 1900, actually just before 1898, something like that. and it remained right around 10 cents up until 1974.
Wow.
For over 75 years, around 75 years, it remained right around 10 cents. That is, and then, what happened in the early 70s? Took us off Nixon took us off the gold. I don't know if that had anything directly to do with it, but that's a big indicator right there. But just thought I'd throw that in.
Well, now you can't buy Campbell's can of soup for less than what? $1.80?
Well, shown. Well, this is a earlier number on MC23. It's just over $1. No, actually, no. It's a different chart. I don't know exactly here. I can't tell, but yeah, it's somewhere around $2.
Definitely not 10 cents.
Yeah,
but it's the same amount of food. And what's crazy is it's less nutritious now. It's more chemicals.
GMO. It's
Campbell's soup for a 4-pack of chicken noodle, it's $5. For a single can of tomato, it's $1.72. The more complex you get, the more expensive it is. But they're typically running around $1.60 on up.
Okay.
That's crazy. Then you look at like Campbell's chunky soups. Those are almost $3.
Oh, yeah. They should be a nickel. Everything should be a nickel.
Right? Then we can afford to start printing pennies again or stamping pennies.
Yeah.
Going back to skills, like what are some of the big things we need to learn as we start looking for the future? What are some big things that we need to learn as people to better prepare ourselves for the inevitable?
Well, a big one for me, and I guess you could call it a skill because it does take practice, is learning to walk very far. Learn to walk a long distance. Obviously, we have so many different modes of transportation right now, but and obviously it doesn't make a lot of sense to walk places. But if we're looking to the past, prepare for the future, I think that's something we need to, that I personally need to know how to do, and be able to walk a long distance.
Well, I just remember, when growing up as a kid, it seemed like my dad knew how to do a little bit of everything. And your dad too, Scott, I know, and Shane, I'm sure yours, but it seemed like anything needed to be, they were general, they could be considered general handymen. Today, you got to call something. If something breaks down, you got to call somebody because it takes so long to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And everything's, especially with cars, everything is so electrical today. It's like hard to, even changing the oil is almost like you got to have a machine to help you do it. But I know that, one of the things that a lot of people are saying, well, we just don't have time. We're so busy. Well, that's because we're distracted. If you take the average American watches 3 hours of TV every day, and on top of that, they have 2+ hours a day of social media, that's 5 hours a day between social media and TV. What if you took an hour a day and learned how to, do a little bit of plumbing? What if you took an hour a day and learned how to do a little bit of, gardening? What if you took an hour a day and don't watch so many, unless your TV is how-to TV, how to build things. But there's so many excuses as to why we feel like we can't do anything because, back then they had more time. Today we don't have as much time. Well, I don't know about you, but the same 24-hour day is still around from 100 years ago. So we all still have 24 hours. And so I feel like there's I feel like general handy, like the other day, something happened and I fixed it. And I'm like, I kind of felt like a man, I felt like I did it. I fixed something broke in the garage and I fixed it.
Well, today I was putting doorknobs on doors, swapping out doorknobs. And my daughter actually, I was like, hey, can you hand me my screwdriver, my electric one? She couldn't figure out which one it was. I'm like, I got to train her better. So I got her corrected. And I'm like, you know what? Never mind. Just hand me the regular screwdrivers. And I did it by hand and showed her how to put the doorknob on. And she's like, how did you know how to do this, Dad? And it was exactly that. It's like I grew up with a father who did everything himself. He never hired anybody to come out and do anything unless he had to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Certain HVAC things, he'd be like, all right, I've got to hire a guy for this one. But if it was plumbing, he could fix it himself. I'm not as advanced placement as he is. I'm Yeah, much farther down in the skill set than he is. Much, much farther. But he has put it on himself to learn all these things, to do all these things. And that's just the way he was raised from his father, who was very much the same. Right. And before that, that's how everyone was.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys noticed how poor the handwriting is of our youth?
Yeah.
It's just,
If you want to send a coded message, write in cursive.
Yeah,
exactly my point. Cursive and calligraphy. I mean, you can get on YouTube and you can see what calligraphers do nowadays. There's only very few master calligraphers actually that exist in the world, from what I understand. And they do some amazing things because that's the way it was done. There were no printers, no computers. If you wanted a certificate, you would have a calligrapher create this very fancy, ornate certificate for graduation or whatever, or a trade. And so that is really becoming lost art, is, like you say, cursive, handwriting, calligraphy. There are a lot of artists out there. There's no doubt. There's a lot of good artists out there, but I wonder about handwriting.
Well, even all the trades are seeing significant decrease. I think there's the percentage of people entering the trades versus the people that are leaving the trades, retiring from the trades, is dramatic. So not only are individuals no longer able to just handyman around their own house, even hiring somebody to come and do that stuff is now going to be diminishing. The amount of people available to even hire to come out,
which makes it more diminishing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's really interesting to see because we're losing 7 tradesmen for every one that enters into the fields.
Wow.
So it's going to be interesting to see in 5 years how expensive it is to swap out an electrical anything.
Mm-hmm.
I need a light socket replaced. I need a fan hung. Okay, it's going to cost you $200. The fan only cost me $150.
Yeah.
But the install guy is going to charge that. He's like, look, I only do these jobs if I'm paid premium because my time is that valuable, right?
Well,
same thing with plumbing. It's same thing with any of the other trades. We've got to learn as many of these skills as possible, especially the basic home maintenance ones. And with that, I also say, we have to abolish this idea that I need this big giant home. Big giant homes are a pain to maintain. Expensive. They have more problems than they're worth. And honestly, go outside and play. I'm so tired of kids playing in my house all the time. I love my kids, but they need to go outside.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to learn more and be more creative if they're playing outside. And that's one of the things we need to fix now. Like our younger generation, they don't have the stamina we used to have as kids. They'll run around the front yard for 5 minutes. Like, oh, I'm so tired. I can't keep playing. I'm like, we do that for days.
Entire afternoon. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. With the friends out on the bike.
Stop to take a drink out of the hose, which is gross because now you don't even know what's in the water. But it makes me think. Do you guys remember the old farmer that won his first marathon that he ever did? His name was
was it in New Zealand?
Australia, Cliff Young.
Okay. Yeah.
He was like 56 and he entered this race. He'd never trained a day in his life.
In his muck boots.
And he ran the whole race and won in muck boots at the age, I think, 56.
And he beat him by like 2 days or something.
He beat everybody, just destroyed everybody.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't know that he was allowed to stop and sleep. And he was able to do all this because he was used to running all day as a sheep farmer.
Yep.
Right. And he didn't need to worry about mental toughness because he already had. He's like, oh, this is just what you do all day. Mm-hmm. This is going to be easy. I just have to run. Okay. And he took off. Was he the fastest? No, but he just was able to keep running and crushed it. That's the story of Cliff Young. If you guys listening, you want a really cool story, go actually watch the videos or read the stories about it because it's fantastic. It is really inspiring.
It's amazing to me, for example, like back in the day, they had a whole room full of books and libraries, and they were so well read, so well versed. And I think that's the other part too, is that we get so, here's another thing that I think is part of the old ways. that's not got it. It's actually got to do with just sitting and thinking, pondering, and just meditating. I think that's a huge thing. You know, everybody's into mental illness and mental health and yoga and all these other things. Well, you know what? When it got dark, there wasn't as much light to keep people up, and so they would spend a few hours maybe reading a book. They would spend a few hours contemplating with their friends and family, and then it was time for bed, and they went to bed, and they woke up as soon as the light turned on. You know, it was just, I think another part of the old ways is just having that sitting, reading a good book, pondering, thinking, even philosophizing a little bit. That's also kind of a lost art because people are so busy with soccer and gymnastics and every other thing. It's like, how many of us really spend time to have a deep conversation with our friends and really,
or even your kids?
Yeah.
Your kids are so busy doing everything else that they don't, we lose the ability to relate to them because they're gone or we're gone. Like, if you look at other countries, and one of the interesting things I've noticed is like the educational system is very much side by side with your kid in your trades, side by side with your kid in your work. Like, my parents, they didn't grow up on the farm, but every time they went to visit their grandparents on the farm, they had chores to do when they got there. To spend time with grandma and grandpa, they did chores with grandma and grandpa because grandma and grandpa still had work to do. That's how a farm worked.
Yeah.
Right. I remember going to my grandparents, and my grandma would be like, "Oh, perfect." And we'd go sit on the back patio and we'd be snapping beans, or we'd be working on, shucking corn, or we'd be working on something. And then I'd get to go play. But that gave me a closeness to my grandmother that I wouldn't have gotten any other way.
Yeah.
But it also taught me the value of work, because guess what we ate? A few hours later, we were eating the food I helped prepare. And I was 4 or 5 or even 10 or 12. Like, those are significant memories for me. And anyone else who can relate to that, those are significant memories for your life. What are we giving our kids? Oh, I spent a lot of time watching SpongeBob today, Dad.
Well, Scott, do you remember any sayings that your grandma would tell you? I remember my grandma, would say, we'd go outside, you're a kid, oh, put your coat on, you're going to catch cold. And like, that always was curious to me. Why am I going to catch a cold if I'm not wearing a coat? How does that make any sense? There was obviously some wisdom there, right? And I won't get into it, but the one that always comes to my mind is, early to bed, early to rise makes men healthy, wealthy, wise. It's scriptural as well, right? So that's, I think, I wouldn't say been lost entirely, but people stay up late, they sleep in late, and it's really bad for your health. It's proven. And so a lot of these old time sayings, there's definitely something to them. So I would say spend some time with your grandparents and learn some of these sayings, where they came from and why.
Oh yeah. The biggest one, my other grandma would say it all the time, is, and she was an extremely frugal woman. My mom says it too all the time still: use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. It's an old Depression era quote that her mom, my great grandma, drilled all the time into everybody. But the old early 1900s slang or colloquialisms, depending on where you lived, like different old timey statements, they ring true today in ways that gives us longing or pause to remember times that were truly better. Right? It's an amazing time to be alive. Don't get me wrong, but we're not appreciating it as well as we could be if we were living more the old ways than anything else.
Well, even a couple of things that are happening in our life are not even that old of ways. Like, I remember having regular family dinner, home cooked meals. Like we'd have every once in a while, we'd have mac and cheese and whatnot, but that was out of a box. But there was home cooked meals. Like, I went to the store the other week, and the lady was like, "So you only shop once a week?" I said, "Yeah." She says, you don't ever forget anything or you lose anything?" And I was like, well, I mean, in fairness, I have a pantry and I rotate and I buy so much extra that if I do end up needing something midweek, I just pull from my home pantry. But it was just amazing that she was like, how do you only shop once a week and get everything you need? And I'm like, and she's an older lady to me. And there's people that go shopping once a month and they get everything they need. They do even more than I do. So to me, it's like even some of those simple things that we take for granted, like shopping and home cooked meals once, is Uber and Uber Eats and whatever the other thing is where you have it delivered, all these food deliveries. Like people don't even have home cooked meals much anymore. And that, to me, that's also an old way. Just even, I mean, you don't necessarily, I mean, it's better if you can eat together as a family, but forget, I mean, just at the very basic level, have a home cooked meal every day. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or learn how to cook your own food every day. Cause I think one of the big things that's going to really take everybody to task when SHTF is, they're not going to even know how to prepare food. They don't even know how to cook. They might know how to turn the stove on, but in this microwave, fast food, home delivery world we live in, some of the just simple, basic things are actually, oddly enough, old ways.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. A few things I want to throw in before we get done here. I know we're short on time. Is first of all, for me, it's very important to at least occasionally give handmade gifts, right? Something I've made myself, and I've given you guys stuff, and and it doesn't have to be something amazing, like a chair. I can't build a chair. I don't know how to build a quality chair, right? I don't have the tools. I don't have the skills, but meaningful things that are meaningful, that have meaning, that are really quality. I mean, you look back 100 years ago, you couldn't find a cheap piece of furniture, right? It is a well-made chair that's going to last 100 years.
Yep.
And to find anything nowadays is extremely expensive. And then, another thing is that I learned, that I had heard when I was doing my research, is, do you know the quickest way to double your money? What's the quickest way to double your money?
Fold it in half and put it
back in your pocket. And put it in your pocket. Yep. That's right. That's the old ways, right? That's how.
That's something my dad used to say.
That sounds like malarkey.
Really? Okay, yeah. There you go. That's like my grandpa. That's something he would probably say. And then I just want to give you all a challenge that I'm going to do myself, is write a handwritten letter to someone, right? Not typed out on your computer and printed. That's what I do, right? Do it in cursive, do it in in your handwriting, and give somebody a handwritten letter. And wow. I think that'll start to connect you back to, at least to when I was a kid. I didn't have a printer or computer when I was a kid. We hand wrote letters, and so that's my challenge in leaving you tonight.
Scott, any final thoughts?
Folding your money over to double it, that's a load of malarkey. It's an old colloquial phrase. Another one that I want to end off on is, tonight's conversation has been the bee's knees for me.
The bee's knees.
The bee's knees.
To a person, awesome. It's referred to a person or a thing that is really liked or really enjoyed.
Enjoyable.
The bee's knees.
That's super cool. Yeah, some of those old things. There's a lot of. I think progressivism is good. We should progress, but we should never forget the values, the principles that are timeless. And I feel like in so much of today's society, we want to progress so fast, so far, that we want to say even those timeless principles are not worth keeping. And that's not true. We need to base on that foundation and have those timeless principles still as part of our life. But then obviously, as technology and things move forward, we can move forward with it. But thank you so much for listening. You've been listening to Prepper Talk Radio, radio for the ready-minded, the podcast for the prepared, with your hosts, Scott, Shane, and Paris, reminding you of the old ways as we move into the future. Keep those foundational things available to us, and check out our friends at survivalfrog.com, Use code PrepperTalk10. They have a myriad of amazing survival prepper tools, resources, food, meats, proteins, all kinds of stuff at their shop. Go check it out and use code PrepperTalk10, the number 10, to get 10% off. And those all of the codes stack. So if they're having a sale and you add our code to it, you'll get another discount. So look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. Have a great day.
See you next week.